All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's AntiwarRadio. I'm Scott. Our first guest on the show today is Michael O'Brien. He's just written his first piece for Antiwar.com. I hope there's more coming. His bio reads like this. Michael O'Brien is the author of America's Failure in Iraq. And in fact, I believe you can go to americasfailureInIraq.com to find out all about that. And I'm going to ask all about that here in a second. But here's more about Michael O'Brien. He was a Department of Defense contractor in Iraq from 2006 to 2007. He was on the national headquarters staff of the Bush-Cheney 2000 campaign in my hometown of Austin, and served in the administration of George W. Bush at the State Department and the Office of Homeland Security. Michael O'Brien is a graduate of West Point and was an infantry officer, an Army Ranger, and a paratrooper. He lives in Arlington, Virginia. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Scott.
Well, that's quite an interesting bio for someone who writes for Antiwar.com, or at least has written one now. Something happened that changed your perspective about things or something?
Well, to say the least, Scott, I was never a big fan of the war, of the invasion in the first place. I supported George Bush because I worked for him. He was our president. But, I'd read a lot about it, about Paul Bremer disbanding the Iraqi Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Interior and all of that. But when I went over there and I worked as an advisor to the Iraqi Ministry of Defense, essentially I was part of about a 2,000-person team that was there to reverse what Paul Bremer did. We were there to get the Iraqi Ministries of Defense and Interior back up on their feet from nothing, basically from scratch. And I worked with Iraqis every day at the Ministry of Defense, and they would say to me, Mr. Mike, we understand Mr. Bush wants to fight the war on terror, but why did he pick Iraq to do it? And that's the God's truth. They would say that to me, and I just had no answer. And then the longer I was there 14 months, the longer I was there, I was like, I just kept asking myself these questions. Why did we invade in the first place? We didn't find any weapons of mass destruction, although we certainly tried. We did get rid of Saddam Hussein, a bad actor. No argument there that he was he needed to go. But the thing about it is that the life of the average Iraqi before we invaded, based on what they told me, it was okay. I mean, if they stayed out of trouble and didn't get in trouble with Saddam or any of his lieutenants, they lived a very normal life. And so with the way the Gulf War ended in '91, the sanctions in between, and then the invasion of '03, and we never hear about all the Iraqis that died. We never hear about them. We hear about the American soldiers that died, but we never hear about the Iraqis that died, or the civilian contractors, of which I was one. And we don't.
Well, that's
there's
because
so much we don't hear about.
That part was the dirty little secret, kind of, right? I mean, if you wanted to read Scahill, you could read Scahill, but otherwise, basically, they didn't want to. That word mercenary is a dirty word left over from when the paid Germans came to fight on the side of the British in our Revolutionary War. We don't like that around here. And so privatizing out so many of the soldiers' duties was the kind of thing that never really got much play, because as much as George Bush wanted to run the war that way and his team wanted to run the war that way, they certainly didn't want to discuss that very much in public, I don't think.
Absolutely not. And, really, there were two types of contractors over there. There were security contractors who are absolutely mercenaries. The old expression, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And these guys are mercenaries. Now, I was not a security contractor, but Blackwater and Triple Canopy and these guys, they definitely absolutely are, because if a civilian does the job that a soldier should do, and normally would do, they're a mercenary. And the thing about it is, and I discuss it in my book, is that beast called the military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower talked about in 1961. Well, we're here. It's alive and well. And I discuss in my book, we don't declare war anymore because it would be too difficult for any president to pull off nowadays. So we go over, and it's not officially a war. And now we're going over with more and more contractors. And him and Hall were sending, say, 30,000 troops to Afghanistan, but nobody bats an eye. Nobody even knows we've sent over 100,000 contractors. And it's making fighting our wars, quote unquote, a lot easier to get the country involved in. Our reasons for going don't have to be as clearly cut and defined. And we can go over there, and because we're augmenting the military with so many contractors, we don't have enough men in uniform to do the job right.
Well, and we know now from reading McClatchy newspapers on a regular basis, Warren Strobel and Jonathan Landay and the guys over there have documented the creation of Hillary Clinton's new private army to protect the giant embassy there in Baghdad. Yep. And this is a great way to say that we're getting the troops out while really just disguising them in their mission. But I want to get back to you because, you're describing basically you're in Iraq, you're an advisor, you're a paid contractor, advising the Iraqi Ministry of Defense in the creation of their army, the undoing of Bremer's order to disband it, as you said. And then was there a particular atrocity that made you just throw up your hands, or at some point, at night you're getting into your bunk and thinking, what the hell am I doing here? At some point, cumulative sort of BS got finally too much to bear, or how did this happen? This change in you?
Well, what happened was, I like to stay up on top of things. I like to stay on top of current events, which I've, always done. And when I got over there, when I got hired, it started right at the very beginning. I was hired by a Defense Department contractor, and I don't want to mention their name. And I went over there, and my first day there, my manager in Baghdad says to me and about 4 other guys, well, you might do the job we hired you to do, but then again, you might not. Things change a lot over here in Baghdad. And I'm going, well, I'm saying to myself, what do you mean I'm not going to be doing what I came halfway around the world to do a job. And the point he was making was, well, really, you're really here for us to collect a fee. I mean, the reason you're here is, well, you're a contractor, and if you're not here, our company can't bill the Department of Defense. So your job really is to stay alive and not end up in a pine box. And the longer you're here, the more money that, you get paid and the more money the company gets paid.
Isn't that cool about the Iraq War, where the whole thing is just nothing but lies all day long, and yet there are times where the truth comes through in such plain English. It's just great. It reminds me of the way you just phrased that. It reminds me of the kids coming back in 2005, hanging out with Cindy Sheehan, talking about how, the reason we call them Hajis is so they seem a little bit less human, so it's easier to kill them. And just, wow, oh, okay, good. There we get the stark truth. You're here so that we can rip off the taxpayer.
Well, the thing is, and it all gets back to, we don't declare war anymore. Therefore, we don't have to have clear goals and objectives. Therefore, we don't have to send enough soldiers, and we can augment it with 3 times the number of contractors. And all these security companies, they're all run by ex-military. The company I worked for, the number 1 and 2 guy were former 4-star generals in the Army. So generals now, the majority of the people are their commander contractors. So who better to run a contracting company when they retire? But the other thing, Scott,
it's just it's the modern Praetorians, right? It's a replay of the Roman Empire. Now hold it right there, Michael, because we got to go out and take this break. I hope I can even keep you into a third segment, too, because we have so much to talk about here. But we'll get to that. I'll talk with you about that during the break here. But everybody, it's Michael O'Brien. Go look at Antiwar.com right now. We're running in the Viewpoints section, his first article for Antiwar.com. Do Americans know what happened in Iraq? Of course, the answer is no, but we're going to find out the truth.
What's up next? Visit the Liberty Radio Network program guide to find out at shows.lrn.fm. That's shows.lrn.fm.
It's all live from baseball to apple pie to bomb. Waco, Texas, Heaven's Gate to Oklahoma bomb. The Desert Storm Syndrome experiment that went wrong. Inject our own cause they probably won't come home anyway.
The Vietnam conflict was a mere experiment. Soldiers came back from the war, couldn't tell you where they went. And commandos that don't come back, they used to their advantage.
All right, y'all, it's Anti-War Radio. I'm Scott Horton. I'm talking with Michael O'Brien. He's written his first piece for Antiwar.com. It's in the Viewpoint section today. He's the author of a book called America's Failure in Iraq and was a DoD contractor advising the new Iraqi government on how to put their army together back in 2006 and 2007. Worked for Bush and Cheney and State Department, Homeland Security, West Point, Army Rangers, paratroopers. Now, exactly what was your rank in the Army before you went and became a contractor there, Michael?
Well, I've been out of the Army many years, but I was a captain. I was a captain when I got out. I did not retire. I got out after my commitment from West Point, and then I went into private industry.
I see. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about this article and this ridiculous Fox poll. In fact, before we get to this Fox poll, because it's about how wrong the American people are about Iraq, but of course, the main reason that the American people are wrong about Iraq is because TV has never even attempted to explain who's who or why anyone is fighting or who's on what side, and at all. I mean, even on a junior high level, they just don't ever even try. And something that, and I guess I already knew this from, especially back in the heyday of the war, I was in charge of answering the letters at Antiwar.com, and we used to get a lot of letters from the soldiers, and I learned then that they really had no idea what they were doing over there. And I just finished reading The Good Soldiers by David Finkel, and he kind of, the irony's in there. He put the irony in there, and basically he's talking about these guys are in charge of patrolling eastern Baghdad, which was a Sadrist faction-controlled area during 2006 and 2007. And none of these guys, including Lieutenant Colonel Kozlarich, however you say it, had any idea what they were doing. They didn't know that they were actually fighting on Muqtada al-Sadr's side in a civil war against the Baathists. They thought that he was the bad guy or something, and that they were protecting the people of that neighborhood from themselves. And, the same kind of BS that they feed us on TV, this is what the soldiers thought. They had no idea of the role they were even playing in that war. And I was wondering if you could tell me, was that kind of ignorance just completely endemic throughout the Green Zone too, where nobody even is honest enough to say, look, these guys are the Dawa Party, these guys are the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution, and, et cetera, et cetera?
Let me just start my answer by saying this. All coalition forces were under a 4-star U.S. Army general. It was Raymond Odierno, just transferred it over to another guy. Before Odierno, it was Petraeus. Before Petraeus, it was George Casey. But underneath that 4-star general, there's 2 U.S. Army 3-stars. One is the commander of all the combat forces, coalition combat forces. They're the ones that go out there. They're the ones that are, fighting the fight in the cities and towns across the country. The other 3-star general was the commander, and this is a long title, the commander of the Multinational Security Transition Command, Iraq. And that was the organization I was assigned to in the international zone, formerly the Green Zone. It was changed to the international zone. And in Baghdad, which is just a walled compound with the city on the Tigris River. And we were there for a reason, to get the Iraqi Ministry, the National Police, the Iraqi Ministry of Interior, and the Iraqi Army, essentially. They have no Air Force or Navy, per se, back on their feet from nothing. So, back to your question, I would not be able to answer what the soldier's perspective was. I can answer what a contractor's perspective was in Baghdad, and of course I traveled all around the country the whole time I was there, dealing more with the Iraq